hey, you're gonna have your degree plan, you're gonna make your degree plan, what do you want to do? And I said I wanted to do composition. And then Mom, having been a teacher herself and being the daughter of a teacher herself, said, okay, how are you going to get paid? And I knew what she wanted me to say. And I said that I would be a teacher. And then again, this is year 14 in a profession where most teachers drop out before year 5, you know, so.
I was at Rice and I want to go to med school, but I was really like jaded from studying all the time and like I just wanted to take some time off from being in school, but like I want to be a pediatrician, and so I really like working with kids, and it's like something that I've always been drawn to. And then I don't even remember exactly how it happened, but I ended up meeting the Teach for America recruiter at Rice. And yeah, and she's literally amazing. And so she was just like telling me about what she does and about like the difference that she feels like she makes. And like I knew that I didn't want to go straight to med school, and like I wanted to do something meaningful where I felt like I was making a difference in the world before I was 30, because that's how old you are whenever you actually become a doctor.
I think education's like the most, not the most, but one of the most important things young people need to have. Both my parents are teachers and my sisters as well, so.
So my initial plan was to join the Peace Corps and do like public health with the Peace Corps. And I was actually approached by a TFA recruiter who came to me and gave me this kind of like silly analogy that was like, if your house was on fire and your neighbor's house was on fire, and if you're honest with yourself, whose fire do you put out first? And I was like, well, duh, like my own house, obviously. And he was like, well, then that's why you should join Teach for America.
One thing, I don't know, I feel like I do everything. I feel like, I don't know, I can't really think of something that is not a part of my job description. Yeah. I feel like I am like at most, like the most forefront and important thing is like that I'm a role model and like a mentor for these kids. I mean, it is my job to teach them chemistry and help them pass the class, but I feel like just that alone is not really like contributing to the mission that I really got into teaching because of. And so I feel like I try to like model like this is like what you can and like should be striving for, and like just like not giving up and like motivating them and like giving them because 10th grade is like it's a very crucial year, and it's when your decisions really start to count, but it's also when kids start to check out and they are very difficult to motivate. And so I feel like I'm a motivator. It's like what I spend 90% of my time doing is like motivating these kids and like explaining to them why what they're doing is important. And so that's like the most important part of my job, I think.
Probably my job description here is to help the students grow and mature and expand their knowledge, learning how to persevere, learning how to learn, learning how to collaborate with classmates, because that's a big part of our classes.
And I've told my students, as being part of a band, modern band, even a classroom, that while they're singing together, playing together, they interact as a team. So if I have a kid who plays during a rest, and everybody knows that kid made a mistake, well, you just did something to hurt your team, you know?
So ideally, I am responsible for designing and providing instructional opportunities for kids to learn math, and also to develop socially and emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, an official, I think it's quite small what our tasks would be. I think really officially it would be designing and implementing lessons that are standard aligned and working to ensure student mastery within those lessons. Knowing that that's from HISD is kind of comical to me, actually, because that sounds like a wonderful world to live in, where as a teacher I get to help my students fulfill their intellectual potential. Do I feel like HISD allows me to do that on a daily basis? Absolutely not. I don't think their curriculum lends itself to that type of, to even like intellectual learning. I think their curriculum lends itself to rote memorization and regurgitation.
You are definitely reaching them in every part of their life. Like, you're not just teaching them something that they're like memorizing and it's only helping them intellectually, because that's not like real teaching. I feel like that's also not the kind of thing that you're going to remember or that's going to like make an impact on you in the future. Like, trying to make things culturally relevant and like trying to push them socially.
I would say my kids, I mean, I want them to learn algebra and, you know, math skills, but some of them do not know how to resolve a conflict without fighting or cussing someone out or just, you know, giving up. And so a lot of them are graduating with very little, you know, like emotional intelligence. They just don't have a lot of tools. They haven't been taught or given a lot of tools to deal with that. Another one is just asking them, like, how are you, not even asking how are you feeling, because usually they won't tell you, they'll just say fine, but actually saying, are you feeling upset, are you feeling sad, and then you know, going from there, and then asking them to state. One thing I learned about shooting, I just do it. It sounds weird, but just asking kids, what do you need? State your need. What do you need to go? Do you need to go outside? Do you need to get some water? Like,
Yeah.
A lot of them they haven't developed communication skills in a lot of ways that people might expect them to have developed at that point, and it's especially with adults, they don't always know how to communicate their need, and so you can't communicate your need, you can't get what you need.
And so it's like we have, at Yes Prep, we do, like, all students are in general education, even if you are special education. So we just like give you individualized attention, but you're in a regular classroom setting. And so like I have students in my classes with autism, and so like some of them are brilliant, like absolutely incredibly intelligent in chemistry, and like they don't really need like the help of others, but that's also like where we try to push them, is like try to work with this person, and like because you learn by teaching, and so it's like pushing them in boundaries beyond just like academics. And so I think that's a really important part of my job that sometimes people also don't think about. Like, they're like, oh, you just teach them about like elements, and I'm like, no. It's a lot more than that.
My school is 98% Hispanic, and about, if I remember correctly, 80% free and reduced lunch, so 80% economically disadvantaged. I had to learn Spanish. I had to learn basic Spanish. Every single communication I have with a parent has to be in English and Spanish. A lot of them only ever spoke Spanish. Or I might have a kid who might be an immigrant from another country who only ever spoke Spanish. Yeah. And so I have to tell them in simple Spanish what to do. And so that is how I myself have had to adjust. Plus, it is a cultural adjustment too, you know?
The biggest way that I think it affects the way I teach is the language barrier. So Galton is an extremely predominantly Hispanic population, and a lot of my students are English language learners. And so I have students on the spectrum from like beginning to what's called advanced high. It's like their TELPAS score. It's like something that all of Texas uses. And so like I have 10th graders who are considered beginning language learners. So like they barely speak English. And so like I have to be really intentional about like using gestures when I'm speaking, and like providing visuals, and like so that they're not sitting there listening and getting absolutely nothing out of what I said. We provide students and teachers with like super individualized like plans and support, and like so we have what's called like our students of concern, for example, and like those are like students with like behavioral issues, or like they have problems at home, or like they're just kind of like our at-risk population, or more at-risk populations. And like we set up like behavior plans for them, and like every individual student has one, and like these are things that like your teachers are responsible and held accountable for like doing. And it's like also a plan where like the student meets you in the middle, like there's something that you're responsible for doing, there's something they're responsible for doing, and it's all contributing to like you moving out of that at-risk category. And I feel like that's very difficult to manage even at our school level. Like our dean of students job is unreal hard. And it also like puts a lot of pressure on teachers, because we can't just teach a class of 30 students and like move on with our day, you know? We have to like really give them individual attention, but I think it's definitely beneficial for the students. It is better, they get support at Yes Prep and individual attention that makes it more likely that they're gonna stay in school. It makes it more likely that they're going to be successful. And like coming from the public school system, I know that that is not the case. Like if you're a problem student, like they send you to alternative school, or like they like suspend you.
We have some students that come probably from very low income family and who are in a very difficult home situation, and we're really struggling with their life. And so it's very tough for them to even think about learning when their basics are not provided. And then we have students who come from a very comfortable home, who have everything provided for them. So it's a juggle between the two, because you have both types of students in the same class. That's quite a challenge for me as a teacher. The students who come from lower socioeconomic background are often absent, so it's very hard for them to keep up with the class. And I have to spend time when they come back to class to help them catch up and understand the material, while the other students who are here all the time, they are ready to move on. So that's very difficult to do both, but that's the role of a teacher, to be able to manage both.
So my school's on the north side. It's pretty much the oldest public school in the state of Texas. We're also one of the largest high schools in HISD, so we're kind of the biggest. We're the big school on the north side. The community is one of the oldest neighborhoods as well. It's primarily Hispanic, although we do have a lot of African American students as well. About 80% are classified as economically disadvantaged, so there's a lot of poverty. Big misconception is, oh, you must have a lot of like ESL or ELL students, and a lot of my kids who are Hispanic don't speak Spanish. They don't know how to, so.
I was very fortunate that when my own kids were younger, I taught college. I had a much more flexible schedule where I didn't come to work every day. And I was home before that came to pick them up, but I can tell you I have nothing but admiration for those teachers here who teach and have little kids. One of the chemistry teacher across from my room has 5 kids.
Wow.
And I watch her, now she only has 1 prep, but she teaches just the 6 classes like I do. And I can tell you how her life is. I mean, she stays here till 2:30 to 3:15, then she goes to pick up her 5 kids and brings them back to her classroom, and she's here just about every day till 5, and then goes home and has to cook and take care of the kids. And they are very young. They are, I think, well, the oldest one must be 10, so 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, and she has a 1-year-old.
Wow.
So watching them, I don't know how they do it. I really don't know. I could not have done it, certainly not with 6 preparation. I couldn't have done it.
On a typical work week, I work easily 46, 47 hours. I have to do things on the weekend, like the game over at Rice University. Yeah. This was something that I was like, hey, this is going to be good for the kids. Absolutely. I'm not thinking about any sort of extra compensation.
Sometimes you do more of the other things than the teaching. We have all kinds of reports to provide for special education students. We have a huge amount of administrative tasks to do, to complete every day. Like every time we email a parent, or a parent email us, we have to keep a log of that. Every time we call a parent, we have to keep a log of that. Every time a student's grade go below a 70, we have to contact the parents, not just their average, but every time a grade goes down. So a lot of parent communication is a huge amount of work. We also have to do a lot of professional development. And we have a new system that's just been implemented this year where we have to earn 50 points a year. So we have to go choose all kind of projects. So I have several other projects going on. So basically I work till 9 or 10 p.m. every day. I'm at school every day until 9 or 10 p.m. But that's also because I teach 6 different levels.
Wow.
Most teachers only have 1 preparation or 2. I have 6, and so that's very difficult. But yeah, we have, I would say at least 40% of our job is administrative tasks. So in Texas, teachers have to teach 6 classes a day. In the rest of the United States, they only teach 5 classes a day. In the rest of the United States, the maximum preparation a teacher can have is 3 preparation a day, and here there's no limits.
Wow.
So I think that a teacher in Texas carries a much higher burden.
The cleaning things, you know, like I had a little boy last year
How does you teach?
poop his pants, would try to wipe his butt with his hand and then rub it on my shirt. I've had kids barf on my shoes. I've had kids last year. It was Polar Express Day. They were watching Polar Express in the cafeteria, and they're all in their pajamas with their cocoa and everything. And this little girl just like barfs on the guy in front of her, like you know, things like that. That you like, you know, when you're like, oh, okay, you teach first graders, it makes sense now. But I mean, tell me another profession other than like a doctor where you have to deal with that. You know, like you don't walk into your law office and have people barf on you. Like, so just like the constant repetition and constant reiteration. You know, and like redirection, just constantly. I think that would surprise people, the amount of effort we spend just getting kids to meet the basic expectation, like before teaching even starts.
So Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, it will go. We're supposed to get to the building at about 7:25. I usually get there about 7:15, 7:20, and then I leave at 4:30. And then if a student is taking a while to get picked up, I could stay as late as 5. Whenever a student has a magnet audition, I choose to stay with them, and on days that I don't typically stay because I want them to be successful.
So tomorrow I will get at school at 6:45.
Well, I have to be at school at 6:30 in the morning, so that's pretty early. And I teach 5 classes in a row, nonstop, no break, no lunch, go. And then I have my first break after my 5th year. And during these 5 classes, I teach 6 different levels because I have one class with 2 different levels, French 3 pre-AP and French 4 AP, so they're all together. So it's really hard for me to juggle the content of different levels in such a short period of time. Then I have one conference period of day and lunch, and then have one more class. And at 2:30, like today, on Friday, we're actually allowed to leave school at 2:30, but not the other days of the week. The other days of the week, we are bound to be in school till 3:15, but of course, I never leave at 3:15. And on Tuesdays and Thursday, we have tutorial where students stay for extra help till 3:30. And then after that, we have meetings. So we have meetings with other teachers, faculty meetings, you know, French Honor Society activities, French club activities. I have to talk to the teachers at the middle school where my students go to teach. And then, you know, probably around 4:30 or 5, I start grading. And then I have to plan my class. In one of the administrative tasks that we have to do is that we have to have online planners available for each week. So that's what I have to do tonight. I mean, today before I leave, I have to plan all my classes for an entire week for 6 different levels. And this all has to be in writing and submitted online.
Well, I would say this year there hasn't been like a typical day. Every week has been some new chaos. But I wake up at 5:30. Try to get to school. I've been a little bit later lately, but try to get to school by 7. The school day starts at 8:30. Kids start coming in around 8:15.
So my alarms go off at like 5:45. I have 3 set because I'm like notorious for being late. I usually get up between 6 and 6:15. Get ready, walk the dog. I leave the house. I live really close to my school. I live like 12 minutes away. So I leave the house usually around 7. We're supposed to be there at 7:25. So I get there with just enough time to you know, kind of set my stuff down, tidy up, get ready for the morning.
Well, I think definitely having less administrative tasks and then having one more conference period to prepare and grade, that would be heaven.
HOU 11 surveyed more than 1,300 teachers from our biggest school districts, Houston, Fort Bend, and Cy-Fair, to get a glimpse inside the classroom.
What's the worst part, the biggest challenge?
I will do 10 hours of paperwork and maybe 2 hours with the kids.
And these 9 teachers agreed to sit down and talk to us about their jobs.
The majority of new teachers do not last 3 years anymore. It used to be 5 years that they quit, but now it's 3.
And we also, and especially now with the increased security, we have to be outside. So in between my classes, we have 6 minutes in between classes. We have to be standing outside in the hallway to monitor what's going on, and especially to be very alert because of what happened last year. I'm sure you're familiar with that, because it was a school right next to ours, where all the shooting happened. So this is constantly on our mind. We have to be very careful and mindful of security. Like, I don't like to send my kids to the bathroom because I don't know what's going to happen out there.
Yeah.
So that's very burdensome. And, you know, I can't even have 5 minutes break in between the class.
Yeah.
To even switch my PowerPoint or refresh my mind of what I'm about to teach, because I have to be out there watching and make sure the kids are secure outside in the hallway. Well, as a result of the shooting, this year we just had one more counselor added, support counselor. That's not a counselor in charge of your scheduling, but counselor with kids who are depressed and that kind of thing. So now we have 2 for almost 3,000 students. So when you think about it, a psychologist, since you're taking sociology class, kind of the same thing, but you know, psychology for 3,000 students, it's kind of unrealistic to have 2 people. And the principal that handle the discipline, we have 4. And that's 4 for 3,000 students. You know, I could see where we could use more of them too. They're constantly worried about discipline. They have to deal with that. They have to call the parents. They have to deal with the police. They have, you know, so I think in general, I don't think people are paying enough taxes that goes toward the school to really provide the kids with a good environment.
I would say the biggest barrier at my school is the large class sizes and the amount of demands placed on the teachers. We're spread incredibly thin, and like the other day I was at home filling out paperwork for all my ELL kids and just checking boxes and signing about 80 papers. I mean, it wasn't hard, it was just tedious, and it took about an hour just for that to sit in a file somewhere. Kid has no idea what any of this means, but it's because we have, you know, to document all this stuff. And then just the lack of support. So for example, we have a team of 4 people at our school. They're called instructional specialists. And we have one for every content area.
Yeah.
So there is a guy who's paid probably about $80,000 whose job is to help the math team be good math teachers and help, and just he's supposed to be the leader, basically, is what
like
it is.
the department head, but he's not a teacher?
Yeah, not a teacher. And never, they'll come for you quick if you haven't turned in lesson plans, but never in my 2 years have I ever received feedback on an actual lesson plan. It's just checking boxes and it's just crossing things off, but it doesn't actually mean anything because we don't get anything from it. Another example is we don't really have a lot of money left for subs, and so one day there were a lot of teachers out, and so they were splitting classes. Basically, someone comes around like, how many kids can you take? And I'm like, basically no more. You see how full this place is? Meanwhile, I have gone up to that office once on my off period to get a pack of notebook paper, and the lights were off, the door was locked. I'm like, okay, maybe they're in there, so I knock, and they were in there literally just like, I'm not saying they weren't working, but they're just like chilling on their computer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, meanwhile, like, why don't y'all pick up a class? Why don't y'all step in when a teacher's out, since you've taught, since you're supposedly specializing in instruction? But I've never seen you teach, I've never seen you model a lesson. It's ridiculous. There's all this stuff there, but it's not used, and just spread out incredibly thin. I am exhausted and worn out, and I just say the cup's empty every day.
Yeah.
But they want you to just keep pouring everything out.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly frustrating because so at some schools, a lot of like charter schools, there isn't support staff. Like they want someone, and in a lot of HISD, there's it's in my opinion it's very top heavy. There's all these positions that have been created in response to we need more support, and so it looks good. Oh, we have a team of this. We have these people on the ground, but they really are not doing that much in my opinion on the ground, and so it's wasted. It's wasted money really, and people. I mean, I'm not saying they're not bad. Like I'm sure they were great teachers, but why are they not? There's a disconnect, and just administration in general. Like it's very political in HIC. So.
I wish that we felt as a campus. And I think this is, when you start a school, you look at like a private school, it's a place like Post Oak School, like a Montessori school, or the Village School, or even like a KIPP or a Yes Prep or something. The vision is so strong at those schools that if you're not on board with it, then like get out, Whereas in a public school, the vision is arbitrary. Yeah. And so getting everybody to operate within the same vision is very difficult too. And so the principals in a public school don't have as much like say in that like, oh, you're either with us or against us, kind of thing. But I personally sometimes feel like an outsider at school because I do things like circle time and like talking about our feelings and flexible seating and things like that, that I'm not as traditional. And so I sometimes feel like, oh, does my vision not align with these people's vision? Or are there other people whose visions align with mine? So I think that would be like a barrier too, is just having kind of like a clear path that we're all kind of like moving toward together. And I think an easy way to fix that would just for the principal to pick something. They are constantly like, well, let's try this discipline practice. Let's try this reading strategy. And then the next year it's something totally different. Even the next month it's something totally different. So pick a path, stand firm, do what you have to do to get everybody on board kind of thing. I do wish we had better curriculum, and I think that would just be having HIC stop trying to write their own curriculum. Yeah. I met the guy who wrote the first grade math curriculum, and his experience is in 8th grade social studies. So, yeah.
And this was not at my current school. This is back whenever I was a middle school band director. I had a student come up to me and he was one of the students. He was a student who was somewhat behind at times, and he was very depressed. He was very sad, and I finally sat him down. I had an office at the time, and I sat him down in my office and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" He said, "My mom got arrested last night." And we sat, we talked a little bit. The counselor that I had at the time was phenomenal. Yeah. And he came, he sat with them, he talked with them. It's identifying stuff like that. You are there to help them grow, because there's a lot of emotional support that you have to give another person.
I've had students, yes, I've had to stay after school and take care of kids who are suicidal. Wow. Kids who come from immigrant family that are losing their family and don't know where they're going. Kids who are hungry. So that's very stressful. Well, you don't ever go home, at least I don't. I don't ever go home and forget about my students. I wake up at night thinking about it. I wake up in the morning thinking about it. I don't get it easily out of my mind.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like non-academic supports, I mean, it's all day, every day for first grade. And I think if you're doing your job well as a teacher, it should be across grade level that you offer non-academic support. And so for me, for first grade, it just looks like conflict resolution, which is like constant. You know, kids will start bickering, and we come and we talk about it, and we come to a solution and we make up, kind of thing. I had a little girl a few years ago who watched her dad get murdered. Wow. And like that's another thing I think people don't realize about teachers is that that we are often the front line of defense and communication for things like that. And so, that type of like non-academic she suffered great trauma on top of already living in poverty, and all the like trauma that brings too. So, it's constant constant like emotional support. We're spitting out robots, and like people aren't robots, and we want to get them ready for this the challenge of being, especially an early childhood teacher, is that you're preparing them for a world that doesn't even exist yet. Yeah. So what I can give you is critical thinking skills, communication skills, empathy. Empathy is like, just look at like today's climate. I see my classroom as like a microcosm of the world, and like it's what I can do to make my mark,
At my school, Gulfton is a really good community. So like we're all very supportive and like helpful of each other. I think that is probably the place where I struggle the most with like the community. Not that it's like a huge issue, but like I am a first year teacher and I'm also super young. And so a lot of these people, like most teachers at Yes Prep are young. Like they're not over 30. So it's like not like they're crazy older than me, but like they've been teaching for 2 or 3 years, they've known each other, and so it's hard, especially because like we're all teaching at different times, and like we don't even, if you're not on the same grade level, you don't see each other, and so unless you have like the same off period, and so it's kind of hard to like connect with people at work, and I don't really hang out with the teachers outside of work because I don't know, it's just not really something that's ever happened like naturally. I feel like I kind of have to force it, and I don't.
The community does not provide any really. The school, I would say, the support I'm given or I receive is mainly from my appraiser, who is like the math dean.
Is that different from the specialist?
No, yeah, very different. So he actually, he handles a lot of like behavioral issues too. He's like an assistant principal basically.
He's like an AP. Okay.
And he was a math teacher for several years. He did TFA. And so he comes into my room about once a month, either for a walkthrough and observation, and he sends me feedback. We have a meeting about twice every semester where it's how's it going. It's a physical check-in about how things are going. So that's the most support I would say I receive. I would say the majority of support I receive is not from anyone in a leadership role. It's from other teachers. It's from
informal.
It's from about 5 other math teachers who are all 3 years or less experienced, and we just are in it together. The principal for our school, the principal for a lot of the big schools in HISD, especially the struggling like big neighborhood schools, they are figureheads. They are just people who sit at tables talking about, well, we're doing this initiative, we're trying this intervention, we're doing this.
Parent relationships are tricky because some parents are like, no, my student should respect you at all costs, and like they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and I'm going to solve that. And like some parents are like, well, what are you doing wrong to my kid? And so that's hard because it's like, obviously I care about your kid because I'm taking my personal time at 7 p.m. to give you a phone call, but like, okay. And so some parents are more combative and defensive of their children, and it's like, I'm never calling you with like ill intent. Like I'm calling you because I want to come to some sort of solution that we can do to help your child because like they're failing my class, or like they're causing disciplinary problems, or like they're causing behavioral issues and they're gonna face disciplinary consequences if they don't fix it. And so that's hard. And like sometimes I definitely do not feel super supported by my students' parents, and that's really difficult because I feel like they're also seeing contrasting things, and like these are the role models in their life, like your teachers and your parents. And so it would be ideal if we could like be on the same page and push your kid to do the same thing.
The attrition rate of teacher is very, very high.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I have not read statistics, but I wouldn't be surprised if probably at least 50% of teacher within their first 5 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think there's a shortage of teacher.
Mm-hmm.
At least in my field, I know there's a shortage, but I think there's a shortage overall. So I think eventually communities are going to have to realize that they're going to have to provide more resources for the teachers if they have to have good teachers.
When people are like, oh, well, why don't the parents, the parents care, but they can't, they're working 3 jobs or 4 jobs, they just don't have the time or the means. So I don't put a lot on the parents of my kids because my parents are breaking their backs and a lot of times the kids are also breaking their backs for the parents to pay the bills. I have kids who work till 2 or 3. So to me, the support that is lacking is from like people in like positions of power. So people in the district, yeah. I think there's too much of a disconnect. People don't actually know what teachers do every day. People in Austin do not have a damn clue what's going on in some of the schools here. There's people who literally sit at a desk all day behind a computer making decisions about what we need to teach, how we need to do it, this and that. And I'm sure they have degrees and they've studied it, but there's a big difference between what should happen and what is happening. And I think the latter is far more important because that's the reality.
So on the small scale, I think it looks like, you know, for parents with children in school, just recognizing that like your child is not the only child in the school and practicing some empathy as a parent too, that the person there is a person who stands up and loves and cares and teaches and like cherishes your child all day, every day for 5 days a week, you know, for most of the year, and like recognize the value in that. And granted, like there are going to be, but I think also like understanding that a teacher's hands are tied a lot of the times, just like our principal's hands are tied a lot of the times, and their boss's hands are tied. You know, a lot of people whose hands aren't tied is the TEA, and they just get to do whatever the hell they want, I guess. And then I think on like the bigger scale, like actually like voting and looking into your local officials and what they actually stand for, and being active in that and being active in kind of what's going on in your local policy. And HISD is like such a shit show right now, and I don't think people really realize the impact that has in that trickle down. You know, if the superintendent isn't stable and he can just like up and leave in the middle of a school year, like what's keeping me, you know what I mean? And I'm the one that's dealing with all this nonsense. Vote for people who support schools. Vote for people who support public schools. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I think there is very, very little information. I don't think your typical voter is at all informed on how school funding works.
And it's the same people who claim they can't afford to pay more in education that advocate for the metal detectors, that advocate for the guns. Yeah. So again, we magically have money for that, but we don't have money to buy books for our kids.
75% say they spend more than $200 on their classrooms out of pocket.
You know, my classroom is home for my kids for a big part of their day, and I want it to be that way. And so there are some things that, you know, that you just suck it up and buy it.
And we were surprised to learn more and more teachers are using online fundraising sites to buy basic supplies.
So now I have to spend hours out of my week, you know, soliciting business partners in the community to see if they would be willing to donate to my classroom.
I have never contributed so much that I feel financially burdened. Yeah.
So we were given absolutely nothing this year. Last year we got a ream of paper and like a box of expo markers. Every teacher can use that. This year we were given absolutely nothing. So what that amounts to for me is I spent 2 Saturdays this year like writing a donor's choose proposal for like Chevron or for donors to provide basic things. I have to go buy things on my own, and it just feels like we have. I know that we're strapped. Every school district is in Texas, but it's frustrating because there's money, but they don't allocate it in ways that kids need it.
We get $100 a year that we can only spend towards school supply, like pencil, pen, and things like that. So like if I want to buy software, I have to pay out of my own pocket. Now I should say we do have what is called an educational foundation where parents raise money, and you can apply for grants to do that. But I applied twice and I didn't get it, and I think the reason is that they give it to the core classes and not to the electives.
Sure.
So after I spent several days writing proposal and being turned down, I don't have enough time in the day to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I think there should be more resources available to the teacher, especially if they would like us to be more creative.
I do know some teachers that do have second jobs, but honestly, not that many. I can see probably where a lot of teachers that might have second jobs might be in more of these rural areas that they don't get paid as much, but we get paid a pretty okay wage.
Yeah.
We're not rich by any means, but we're not poor by any means either. I don't know if you're familiar, but the way education in Texas works is that the closer you are really to a major metropolitan area, the better you're going to get paid. HISD pays well, Spring will pay well, Goose Creek will pay well. Shepherd ISD will not pay well.
Yes, there are many teachers who live here and go and have a second job.
Wow.
Yes, and I could not even imagine doing that.
A lot of my friends do like coaching, or they do other things where they get stipends for it. So
coaching, yeah, like
not really another job, but it's definitely an added, like another part time. It's like a 1.5 jobs.
And honestly, like the benefits are really good of being a teacher. You know, we do get time off. Luckily the pay in HISD is quite good comparatively.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
So starting salary is about 51, which is good. Because when I was in Oklahoma, I was making 32.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's pretty standard. You know, Oklahoma had a big teacher strike because that salary has not changed in decades. And even in order to make what I make now in HISD, I would have had to work for Oklahoma for like 30 years. You know, really, even the veteran teachers are just not making enough money. Most of the teachers I knew there that had families had second jobs that they worked on the weekends. And, you know, you don't really have to do that at HISD. It's, you know, with my income and my boyfriend's income, like, it's decent. We make a good living, you know. So I can't necessarily say that the pay is bad for me personally, although I feel like the amount of time I put in, I should be getting a lot more.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I love the kids. I like being able to hang out with people all day, and you know, I get to talk and sing and write and be creative and kind of do all the things that I like to do before I got a job anyway. So
the nature of what I teach and the nature of my classroom, it's a very entertaining thing for a child. I teach children anywhere from ages 4 to 11. And I organize my class to where it's very fun. It's very entertaining. I organize it almost like a DJ in which there's no dead time, you know, and because I understand the mentality of a child. You know, if I stop for a second and start trying to pull up the next program on the computer, well, the kids are going to go insane. So for classroom management, I try to keep it as well-paced as possible. Because of that, they really like me to the point where I cannot enter my building without getting at least 3 hugs every day.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's you know, whenever you're going into a profession, into a workplace where 600 people look forward to seeing you every day, there are definitely worse jobs.
The kids are the best part, and so the kids and my coworkers. Like the human connection is the motivating piece. It's not, I hate writing lesson plans. I don't like grading. I like working with kids and seeing like a light bulb go off. Either, oh, you finally understand why we have to like do something to both sides of the equation, or oh, today you talk to this person without cussing them out, like, and then coworkers just, I mean, I work with a lot of very, very funny, big-hearted people.
What's the best part of the job?
When they leave me and they go to high school and I get that graduation invitation.
Best part of the job is building relationships with the kids.
When they think they can't do something and then you show them and they look at you like, wow.
Yeah, I think that the way the American system, and I didn't grow up in this country, as you can hear, is set up, it's almost like a blue-collar job. I think is not really in sync with somewhat of a job that's supposed to be a bit of an intellectual job. If you want teachers who are going to raise the intellectual level of their students and really not just do rote control and rote work with the students with filling out worksheet, which I don't do, it takes a lot of thinking, and to do a lot of thinking and be creative, it takes time.
People do make comments about how much we make, which is I mean, as a 21-year-old fresh out of college, I make plenty for myself, but I could never raise a family on a teacher salary. That's not something I could do. And if you divided the number of hours I'm working a day by how much I'm making a day, I do not think it's above minimum wage. And so that's a little hard, but for me, it's not a huge issue. If I wanted to have children or buy a house, these are things that I could not really do without a second much better income, comfortably, And so I think that's why a lot of people don't stay teachers, because it's not really a sustainable lifestyle. The growth in income over the number of, it's not there. My base, as a first year teacher, I am perfectly fine with, and I feel it's a very respectable income, but the fact that I could work there for 20 years and be making maybe $10,000 more.
Well, I don't think you can really fault the district in any way. I think it's just the way the whole education system is set up. I also think that for the kids to have 7 classes a day is kind of ridiculous. It's too much for them to juggle, so I think they do a very superficial job.
To my school administration, I would say we are being overworked. We're running on fumes. You're putting us with the most vulnerable kids who need people who aren't running on fumes, who need people who aren't overworked. We shouldn't have 40 kids in a class at our school. We should have 10. And then to HISD, put all y'all's politics aside, and actually go into your schools and see what is going on. And to the state, I would say, give us more than 25 minutes for lunch, require that. Update the finance formula, which hasn't been updated since the 1980s. Since y'all say that you're preparing students for 21st century, how about we update the laws so that that is true, and require a class size cap for secondary schools, because there isn't so far. It's only for primary. So for Houston, for HISD, there's this thing called recapture, where basically the state determines if you're a property wealthy or property poor district, and that's determined by property values and tax rates and all that. So this is a very property wealthy district. So HISD is called a wealthy district by the state, even though HISD, and it affects all the cities the most. So Houston and Dallas are the wealthiest things, but we have some of the poorest communities. So we have to pay back money. We're given money. We collect money from the tax revenue. We have to send back, I don't even know how much it was last year, money to the state that then gets redistributed to poor districts. And there's a huge lawsuit right now well, the U.S. Department of Education sued Texas because Texas basically set this unofficial cap on special ed services to try to save money. They said you can't have more than 8.5% of kids labeled special ed, which first of all is problematic, but the national average is about 13%, and in high poverty areas it's typically higher. It's around 20% of kids usually require services. And the state was basically punishing schools for going over that. Well, we got sued, the state got sued for that, so now the state has to pay back all this money. So it's all messed up.
The future of the world is in my classroom, and the future of the world is in all of our classrooms. And if we want to reach that place, if we want to live up to this idea that America is like the best of all possible worlds, if we are the best country in the world and we want to live up to that ideal, then we need to treat the people who are in the sacred space of a classroom like they are the best people in the world. Yeah. And the education that we're giving them right now is not the best.
Public education systems need to be supported. At the end of the day, this country was founded on all people are supposed to be created equal, and we are making more of a class system just by our education system in some cases.
You want to limit the amount of money that you spend on public services, like welfare, food stamps, all of those things. The people who receive those things are typically working very low wage jobs or have no skills to be able to get a higher paid job. Why don't they have any skills? Because they got a shitty education. If we want to eliminate that, which I have whole thoughts on like why we are not eliminating that, but which I think is just like deeply, deeply rooted in racism in this country, that the top will stay on top and the bottom will continue to stay on bottom until we start acknowledging that they're people. But we have to start, if we want to be the best country in the world and we want to have the highest math scores in the world, or we want to I think America is getting really like butthurt that all the engineers, the doctors that are coming that are in America are Chinese, Indian, like they're not American. And I think if as a country, if we're going to say that that's wrong, then we need to start building up our, kind of like, we just watched First Man, but it's like the space race, like if you want to be first, you put money into it and you get first. And right now we're not doing that. So I would tell them, put your money where your mouth is.